The funeral for Pope Francis is happening right now in Rome, and the live streams of it show a beautiful ceremony, chant and music, liturgical music from all corners of the church. Every rite of the church is represented. The Mozambique rite, the Syro-Malabar, they're all being represented because the Pope is the pastor of the universal church, of which there are 24 rites. It's solemn and beautiful, but there's some been weird things happening, and I'm going to cover a story here in a moment that some will immediately have a gut reaction thinking I'm trying to make hay off of this. I'm not, actually. I'm going to try to give you a more rational explanation, more material explanation, a scientific explanation for something that happened that is being reported by a news outlet that I use sometimes, and they're doing it in a way that suggests, well, you'll see. But let's go first to this unfortunate story that happened yesterday with the pallbearers and the public mourning. This comes from The Telegraph. The secular world is celebrating Francis, trying to canonize him. You'll probably see him on those blasphemous prayer candles soon. You know the ones I mean, where they put John Lennon and Barack Obama and Stephen Hawking and Barney the dinosaur. I don't know, whoever else their heroes are on these candles that are a mockery of Catholic prayer candles. They're sort of saints, right? They're false saints. You're probably going to see that from them with him too. But this headline from the Telegraph is the very confused about the immutable reality of the flesh mourners to greet Pope's coffin. The pontiff, who called for greater tolerance of that alleged community, chose to be buried at Saint Mary Major Basilica. And him being buried at St. Mary Major Basilica, by the way, is odd because typically those who are buried there, from some reading I was doing this morning on this, are only ones who have been recognized as saints later. You see St. Pius V is buried there from what I read this morning. But that's not the topic of the moment. We'll plenty of time to adjudicate that later. This is almost like the last hurrah of the Bergoglian ideology on full display. If they don't get a Francis II here in 3 weeks or so. Here are the details. Quote, very confused dudes will greet the Pope's coffin at the church where he will be buried. It was reported on Friday. In what will be a unique moment, an extraordinary gesture, 40 mourners chose from the poorest communities, including very confused dudes and migrants, will greet the pontiff's coffin as it is carried up the steps of St. Mary Major Basilica. Prisoners on day release, those who have survived being illicitly moved against their will, ladies of the night, and the homeless are also included in the invitation. They will each hold a white rose, greeting the coffin following its transportation from St. Peter's Basilica, where the funeral service will take place to the site of his burial at St. Mary Major, 2.5 miles away. The request to invite the poor and dispossessed is understood to have come from Pope Francis himself. He left details for how his funeral should be conducted, including the burial at a church outside the Vatican and dying wishes contained in his last statement. The Rome daily newspaper Il Messaggero, among other outlets, reported that confused dudes were being included in the group of disadvantaged people chosen to meet the coffin on its arrival at the Basilica. The Telegraph asked a Vatican spokesman who would neither confirm nor deny the reports. Joe Stanley, chairman of a James Martin-type Catholic group based in London, said, "This is wonderful. It really reinforces the Pope's message that Christ loves everyone and that everybody as a human being has a right to be included in the Catholic Church. In some ways, it's not surprising. We know the Pope had very good contacts with that alleged community in Rome and Ostia. We know he certainly had lunch with them on several occasions. As part of his general message that he kept trying to put across that you are included in the church and that all of us are imperfect Catholics." End quote. James Martin must be absolutely prancing in glee while listening to show tunes over that news. And to be clear, it isn't the inclusion of sinners, various kinds of sinners, that actually bothers me all that much, although that can be a cause for scandal in some quarters. Christ ate with sinners. You can make the argument that inviting sinners, especially if they were repentant or in the process of repentance, like say the prisoners, that's the least of the problem here. And this is one of his final wishes. He also left a fun statement that's throwing a curveball for the conclave we'll talk about in a moment. But I'm going to get to the unfortunate main story here. And the unfortunate main story comes from NovaWatch. It involves a photo of Francis lying in state that I'm going to only show briefly because this is your warning. Because I'm not trying to gross people out or anything, but it can cause people something. Just enough will be shown for you to get the point of what they're driving at, and then I'm going to counter their argument with a material argument here. Headline from Novus Ordo Watch, a sedevacantist news outlet. Lying in state, the body of Francis appears to be turning dark. There it is, picture of his face. No, that's not photoshopped. I've seen this picture floating around from other sources, and I'm moving past it. This is not the first time a pontiff's body has rapidly decayed. Pius XII is the most famous modern case because the Vatican didn't have air conditioning. They didn't properly store his body, and he, according to his wishes, didn't want to be embalmed. And so I will spare you the details of what happened, but needless to say, it was so bad with Pius XII that after the fact, John the 23rd and Paul VI changed the norms on this so to prevent what happened with Pius XII from ever happening again. It was that bad. And we'll go over the details scientifically here in a moment to really tell you what happened, what's probably at fault here. But here's Novus Ordo Watch. Again, a sedevacantist outlet. I use them all the time as a source. I like the work they do. I find their reporting amusing at times, actually. And this is not a dig at Novus Ordo Watch. It's just I have an alternative explanation here. Here's what they say. Quote, and remember, sedevacantist outlet when you hear the language they're using here. The body of the late Jesuit apostate Jorge Bergoglio, Pope Francis, has been lying in state inside an open coffin in St. Peter's Basilica since Tuesday, April 22nd. Tens of thousands of mourners have been paying their respects. On Friday evening, 8 p.m. local time, the casket will be sealed, which did happen. The funeral will take place on Saturday at 10 a.m., followed by a procession to the Basilica of St. Mary Major, where Bergoglio's remains will be buried. As Francis was lying in state at the Casa Santa Marta on Monday evening for the certification of death, it was evident the left side of his face was showing discoloration, perhaps due to hematoma. Now, however, his body, at least his face, is turning a greenish gray as the image above shows. Below is a full photograph from which the above detail is shot, and we're just going to skip past that. Pretty much the same thing happened to Pope Paul VI in August of 1978. He was decomposing rapidly and noticeably, and a big ventilator had to be installed as he was lying in state in St. Peter's Basilica because the stench emanating from him was overwhelming. In October 2018, Pope Francis declared Paul VI the saint. It remains to see how Bergoglio's remains will look when the moment comes for closing the casket on Friday night. You can see kind of what they're driving at here. And so I'm going to give you now an explanation. Rooted in science and all this, maybe, and I will give you the caveat, historically, heretics and things have had this kind of thing happen. That's noted. You can read about it in Catholic history. I'm going to have to note that because others will if I don't. But here's a material explanation. This from the science. I'm not asking you to trust the science. I'm just giving you a mainstream explanation. The article from Novus Ordo Watch states that the body of Pope Francis, who passed away on April 21st, shows signs of rapid darkening during public viewing. And while the article suggests this is unusual, several plausible explanations rooted in medical and forensic science can account for such post-mortem changes. Below here are some reasons. The first would be, and this is probably the most relevant, is what's called livor mortis, livor, L-I-V-O-R mortis, or post-mortem lividity. This is the settling of blood in the lower parts of the body due to gravity after death, causing a purplish or dark discoloration of the skin. This process typically begins within 30 minutes to 2 hours after passing away and becomes fixed within 8 to 12 hours. If the body was positioned in a way that blood pooled in visible areas like the face or head, it could appear as darkening. The description from the article could be a manifestation of this, especially if the body was lying supine or slightly elevated during viewing. It's a natural process and not indicative of anything unusual. There's also a decomposition or environmental factor, which begins shortly after he passes away, influenced by factors like temperature, humidity, and the body's condition. Warm environments or high body heat from crowds, again, you're having a lot of people going in and out of that place. They said at one point, like 90,000 people, okay, can accelerate early decomposition, leading to skin discoloration. Again, the Novus Ordo Watch article mentioned large crowds, which could raise ambient temperatures around the body. If the body was not adequately cooled or embalming was delayed, early decomposition could cause darkening, particularly in areas with thinner skin like the face. And that could be a very real thing here. The Vatican has a track record of botching this. They really do. Go back All of them, they have all of these. They have a track record of really botching this process. If the body was not adequately cooled or embalming was delayed, decomposition could start early. It's a standard for papal viewings to preserve the body for public display, for it to be embalmed ahead of time, typically using formaldehyde-based solutions to delay decomposition. However, if the embalming process was poorly executed due to insufficient chemicals, improper application delays, it could fail to prevent natural postmortem changes, leading to discoloration. You'll find stories all over X right now about Pius XII. If you really want to know what happened with him, because he wanted to be buried the way God intended, more naturally, and so the coroner for the Vatican at the time didn't use traditional modern embalming methods. He used his own cocktail of ways to try to keep him preserved long enough for all the state functions, and it went extremely poorly, notoriously, historically poorly. The article here for Novus Ordo Watch claim of rapid decay could stem from suboptimal embalming, especially if the body was exposed to warm conditions, like 90,000 people walking in and out of the room, or if the process was rushed due to high-profile nature of the event. Pope Francis reportedly also passed away from a cerebral stroke, coma, and cardiac arrest with pre-existing conditions like pneumonia, hypertension, and diabetes. These conditions can affect the body's appearance after death. For example, stroke-related tissue damage or systemic infections, say from pneumonia, you remember the problems he was in the hospital for, could contribute to uneven skin coloration or bruising-like effects. Medications or treatments, anticoagulants, might also cause blood to pool or discolor more visibly. The Novus Ordo Watch also notes disfigurement on the left side of his face, possibly from the stroke, which could exaggerate the appearance of darkening in that area. In other words, there's plenty of normal explanations for this. And, when they open with the apostate Jorge Bergoglio, you see kind of the bent. I'm happy they don't hide their bias at all. So he's darkening, and his body is darkening in appearance, likely caused by either an improperly done embalming or the fact you have 90,000 people walking in and out of that room all day during the viewing process, which is going to cause the ambient temperature to rise significantly. Probably the explanation. I will, however, also point out, because if I don't, others will. Novus Ordo Watch is hinting at, but something I've seen already others comment on online, that this is an outward sign of something interior with Francis. And this has happened before in the history of the church, and it's often noted in those times that corrupt popes or heretical Protestant leaders like Luther were, shall we say, very gruesome to behold after they departed this world. Paul VI was noted there. I know a lot of people have a hard time with somebody who was canonized being called a heretic, but when Paul VI was canonized, everybody rolled their eyes because it was political. There was no natural following of him as you would with most other saints. Carlo Acutis has a greater natural following than Paul VI did. And people criticize Carlo Acutis for having not much of a natural following, right? You mean, regardless, whatever you say about him, you've noted that. You had to have noted that in the critiques. Paul VI had virtually none. And the state he was in when they were found, when his funeral came, was historically bad. Right up there with the state of certain heretics in history. Now, before we wrap up today, because it's not a topic I enjoy talking about much, and I don't think you do either, I want you to be able to watch the funeral without any further interruption. This story came to us. Diane Montagna posted this. Just in, according to sources at today's General Congregation, a meeting of cardinals prior to a conclave, Cardinal Pietro Parolin presented a letter in which Pope Francis confirms that 76-year-old Cardinal Angelo Betu is excluded from voting in the conclave. The date of the letter is unknown. A canonist with whom I spoke said it is essential that this letter be made public because it has public legal effect and should therefore be subject to the same ordinary scrutiny given to any other papal document having public legal effect. So on the left there is Betu, and there's Cardinal Pietro Parolin, one who is considered to be Pape Bile. Now, if you're not familiar with Betu, he was the most recent cardinal in a long line of cardinals to investigate Vatican financial misdeeds. Except if you believe the official account of it, he profited from it personally. It certainly looked like that. It looked like he was all involved in it, and he became at least the fall guy, if he was unwilling. He became the fall guy for those misdeeds. But he followed Cardinal Pell investigating that. Cardinal Pell followed Vigano in investigating this stuff. The money where they were finding money all sorts of places it shouldn't be. Betu took the legal fall for it. He's still a cardinal, but he has been barred from having any duties of cardinals. And he showed up to this pre-conclave meeting and very vocally said he had voting rights. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who is, some say, the front runner to become the next pope, is the one presenting a letter saying that Cardinal Betu has no voting rights in this. Weird how that works out. I would love to have had that letter be made public by the Camerlengo, even if it's Kevin Farrell. Not a fan, but he's supposed to be neutral in these things. Parolin, virtually no one talks about Farrell being Papabile, but Parolin is. Curious. I also want to point out that I've got my own sources who've told me, and something that should cause you to pray during this, the conclave's begun already. You've had cardinals meeting for the preparatory sessions before the conclave, talking about the rules and discussing the state of the church and the state of the world to frame. They're setting the framing discussion for the conclave. But they're not the only ones now who have shown up. And I don't mean the media either. Intelligence agencies have shown up. I'll tread carefully here, but the intel agencies from Cardinal Zen's homeland have shown up. Their agents have. And yes, they're trying to manipulate things. They have their chosen candidate. You can guess who that is. That war in Eastern Europe, the country that the official story is the aggressor. Their agencies have shown up. And yes, my own country's agencies have shown up too. Please pray for this conclave. Pray that these cardinals will have the fortitude to resist these machinations. This isn't the first time that they've tried this stuff. They did it in 2013, did it in 2005, and did it probably going all the way back to Paul VI at least. Pray that their will is not done, but it's the will of God that is done. These agencies will all be representing their governments, and they will all have different opinions of who should be pope, but sometimes they might converge. It could be they think that Parolin is the ideal choice. It's all geopolitics for them. Lottie says, praying for Pope Francis and for the conclave. By the way, all you channel members, you get a free super chat once a month. Please use it. YouTube gives that to you as something you get for being a channel, supporting the channel through the YouTube join button. Please use it. If they're going to give that to you, use it. And yes, please, everybody pray for Pope Francis in the conclave. Also, Lumite is a new member. Thank you for becoming a member. It is greatly appreciated. If you ever thought about supporting the work we do here, it does keep these daily messages coming. It is greatly appreciated. You get a few perks for it. Description box below for most of those kind of things. Short Pusking says, what if I don't care about the Vatican? Am I bad? I don't know why you're in this channel commenting on this if you don't care about the Vatican, but if you're a Catholic, you should care about what's going on in Rome. You should. I've never taken seriously the claim of, aspired to be like a Middle Ages peasant who had no idea what was going on in Rome. Yeah, okay. We live in a media age where this stuff we're being bombarded with this stuff. And it can be, it's either a grace or a curse, and it's entirely your choice on what it is. Because when you hear these bad stories coming from Rome, it gives you an opportunity to pray for the conversion of others, or for that people be steadfast in their faith, or whatever it is your conscience dictates to you to pray for. But it's an opportunity to pray. David Wilson says, Operation Gladio. Yes, there's a book written by a disaffected Catholic talking about the role of the intel agencies with the Vatican going back decades. It's a very eye-opening thing. He cryptically, when asked, the author did, when asked later on if he was a Catholic, he said, that's a complicated question. It's not a complicated question. It's a simple question. There's no reason to leave the church, ever. Ever. There's no reason to ever leave the church. Coverage of funeral. The Vatican's got a YouTube channel for it. Like I started with, it's very beautiful things going on there for now. But yesterday, as I said at the beginning, the College are the very confused about the reality of the flesh, and other groups that were Francis's pet projects had representatives there helping with the bringing in of the casket. I mean, it's just bizarre stuff. Bizarre. Jerome, what are the chances Perilous will be the next pope? Only the men in the room, and God knows what the answer to that is. Why you don't see me making too many videos on who the next pope's going to be. At this point, it's just clickbait stuff. Really, when I see that, it's just clickbait because, again, nobody knows who's going to be the next pope. Everyone's just bloviating on that. Maybe, knowing what these guys stand for is one thing, but if they're not going to be honest with you and tell you that, most of your really conservative cardinals that you want to see as pope aren't all that conservative, when you really look at them, unless they're telling you that, then it's nothing more than clickbait. You can guarantee that Eucharistic prayer too will be used. Maybe. The Vatican has traditionally had higher standards for its Novus Ordo Masses than any diocese. For example, until Francis, it was forbidden entirely to receive communion in the hand. Entirely forbidden. If you try to walk in wearing shorts to Mass, they would just turn around and not let you, they'd just turn you around and not let you in if you're a tourist. They had higher standards than we did. That got relaxed, but maybe, just maybe, they're going to bring those back, at least until the next pope comes in, depending on, then they'll do what he says. But maybe Farrell and others will tell them, no, you have to bring these standards back. And you might think it's weird to expect Farrell to do that, but he was out there wearing traditional looking vestments for his for the papal masses he was holding, the masses for Francis. Things that nobody in Rome was wearing for the last 12 years. That, attachment to traditional vestments is not a sign of being a traditionalist by any stretch. Even the modernists love the beauty of the liturgy and things. Lenos has started watching the funeral, but I couldn't stomach it, especially when I found out about the confused involvement. Yeah, I can understand that. Take it as an opportunity to pray for Francis. That is your duty. Everyone's got the duty at that point. I'm curious though what you think about this. Nola says none of the above wins. Right. If you're referring to who should be pope, I want whoever will do the will of God, whatever his will is. If his will is that we are a wicked generation deserving of further chastisement, then that is his will, and that is his business. And we all get to figure out why it is we warrant this. If his will is that we get relief finally, and we get a pope of restoration, then okay, that's what we deserve. That's why you should be praying every day when you hear these horrible news stories coming from Rome and others. Damien Keller says we can have surfboard masses in the States. They had that in Italy. I think it was Italy. I reported on that a couple of years ago. Literally a mass offered in the ocean water by a priest standing there with using a surfboard as his altar. And he got a slap on the wrist from his bishop for that. To give you an idea, Cardinal Zuppi, a modernist, is considered a conservative in Italy. To give you how far gone this is. Quentin is banned from my live chat because he's trying to leave people out of the church. Pope Stine, no thank you. No thank you. Chesty Marie says, hopefully we don't get who we deserve, but rather a good and holy pope. Yes, God is a God of mercy. He's also a God of justice. Let's hope, for our sake, let's hope that whatever it is we were to learn from this pontificate, we've learned as a Catholic people, and we can now move forward. Another channel said Pope Benedict XVI didn't get procession in Basilica, but put in a van at night. The picture was shown too. Yes, that's true. Well, they did him, to use modern slang, they did Benedict dirty. They really did. They treated him like he was nothing special. Anyone concerned about the end times, the kings in Revelation, all that? How do you read it? The magisterium has been very silent on it, and then personal interpretation of Revelation is a very sketchy thing. That's why Protestantism doesn't make any sense to me. Fine. All right, folks. I'm just curious what you might have to say about this. Do you take at face value the Betu letter, an undated letter from Pope Francis allegedly saying that Cardinal Betu could not participate in the conclave, brought to the conclave by Cardinal Pietro Parolin, whom some say is the front runner. This happening during Francis's mourning, the mourning for Francis, leading up to his funeral. A bombshell letter that should have been bigger news, because now that's 2 cardinals. Yesterday, I said there were 2 conservative cardinals who will not be participating. It came out afterwards that actually one of them will be there, but the other won't. And I don't know what his internal church leanings are. That's 2 cardinals now who won't be participating, who otherwise would. So I'm curious what you have to say. The master switch says that letter smells. Yeah, it does a little bit, doesn't it? It does just a little bit. It's almost as if you want to have the one man who could be in the room who could tell you how bad the financial situation of the church truly is, how bad the rot is in the Roman Curia. It's almost as if they don't want him in the room. Odd how that works out. Ari Grantham says someone with close ties to a certain 3-letter American intel agency says Francis has stitched up the conclave to produce another demonic. We might know the same person. Re, we might know the same person. That doesn't mean though we don't know who's going to come. And Shawn Marie says correctly, the Holy Ghost does not choose the Pope. That is correct. Benedict XVI said that explicitly. God and the Holy Ghost do not choose the Pope explicitly. Wish people would understand that. Let's see. Supporters of the Athanasius Schneider fan page and FB show disturbing AI artwork. Yes. I almost showed it as a warning to people. There are people out there now promulgating like AI video of Francis waving with like multiple arms to try to prove there's some sort of like big secretive plot going on. It's an AI generated image. Somebody just made it using Grok or ChatGPT or something. People need to learn how to spot AI. Unfortunately, I could post an AI video clip right now to claim it was the truth, and half of you would not notice it because most people haven't figured out how to spot it yet. That's not a slight against anybody in the audience. Most of y'all are too busy to spend the time to look at what AI is and be able to figure out when you're being deceived. I get it, but the stuff's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. This is why now there are allegedly Catholic channels with AI voiceovers reading AI scripts. It's just disturbing, like what's happening. Raymond says the church is in a perilous state. I listened to a devastating critique of the Francis papacy last night from a lay member of the faithful. I couldn't fault it. No, there's a lot of those out there. And there's a lot of people who left the faith because of him. That's why you must pray for him. And Sandra Mayor says on AI, it's getting harder and harder to spot them. That is true. And that is something we should be concerned with. And I'm not a big fan of government regulations, but I would absolutely like some on this. It's because you're going to see a political upheaval from AI. Did this happen to Benedict XVI? Do you mean like the discoloration? I don't know because they kept him as far from cameras as possible. They moved him into a van in the middle of the night. As far as I remember, there wasn't any public exposition of the body, nothing. AI could be the image of the beast. I don't think so. I think it's going to be, I think we're a ways away from the man of sin. And I think we can't wrap our head around what the image of the beast is going to be yet. Leo watches as people don't pray for good pope. We are part of the problem. Yes, we are. Always be praying that these cardinals in the conclave will do the will of God. They are supposed to be invoking the Holy Ghost and listening to him, his promptings. That means they need to all be in a state of grace, every single one of them, and they need to actually be putting aside their own ego. I know this is a hard thing to wrap our minds around, that they need to be putting aside their own egos and their own ideologies and their own vision of what the church should be. I've seen no evidence that that's been the case in any conclave since 1938, 1939 or something. I mean, it's been that long. Politics has been the rule in the post-conciliar era. Leaders of the big Eastern Orthodox Church did a no-show. I'm sure there were other Eastern patriarchs there, but I'm not surprised that they didn't show up. All right, folks. Curious what else you might have to say in the comments, so let me know. And please pray for Francis's soul and pray for the cardinals to actually do their job. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.